Hello and welcome to my channel. I invite you to join me on my journey to design and build this oak game case. I had previously built a chessboard and chess and checker game pieces. I also previously made a Chinese checkerboard. I needed something to store all the game pieces in, so I came up with the idea for an all-purpose game case. I designed it to hold the game pieces, and I found room in my design for a few extras. I wanted it to be something very special, both durable and with a fine furniture-like finish. My hope is that this case and these games will be enjoyed by my family for generations to come. Alright, let's get to it. I drew the plans for this game case with LibreOffice Draw. I use the LibreOffice suite just about every day. It produces results as good as other expensive office productivity software with one big advantage: it's free. I'll link to it in the video description. I'm cutting what will be the box and lid sides. This is 3/4 inch oak. Later in the project, as I neared completion, I realized I should have used 1/2 inch. The finished case is way more sturdy and heavier than it needs to be. It also would have saved me some money. I'm checking the grain to make sure it will match on the corners when I assemble the box. Naturally, there will be one corner that doesn't match. There is a workaround for that if you use thicker boards and slice them down the center with a bandsaw. I don't have a bandsaw, so this was not an option for me. I'll live with one corner not matching. I'm using a table saw sled and sled stop to allow me to duplicate cuts with a high degree of accuracy. This is essential to ensuring the case will be perfectly square when it comes time for assembly. Time to cut the 45-degree angles. The 45-degree table saw sled will again make it possible for me to make precise duplicate cuts. The piece I'm about to cut is already the perfect length. When I cut it, I want to create a knife-like edge without changing the length of the board. The sled allows me to do this easily. The cut in the backstop of the sled tells me exactly where the blade will go. This cut is exactly what I'm looking for. With all the grain matched, I can proceed with the rest of my cuts. Again, the sled stop is key to repeating duplicate cuts. If a board is too long to use the sled stop, I simply use the saw's built-in fence as the stop. In case you were wondering, yes, I did make both my 90-degree and 45-degree table saw sleds. Now I need to rip the pieces I just cut to the proper width. Both the main box and the lid will be made from these pieces. Again, I have to make sure the grain is oriented properly before I make these cuts. These pieces will make the frame for the lid. You can see how the grain is the same as it transitions around the corners. Next, I have to notch out each side piece so that the top and bottom boards can nest into the framework that makes up the box and lid. You'll see how this plays out when I assemble them. When making these cuts, I have to be accurate with both the width and depth of the cut, and it has to be identical on each board. Woodworkers with a better equipped shop would use a table router to notch these boards. It's safer and makes a cleaner cut. I don't have one, so I have to use my table saw. Now I'm cutting them at 90 degrees to the first cut to form the notch. Now to finish notching out the box sides. Time to glue together the sides of the box. I'm using a 4-foot level to make sure they are perfectly aligned. Painter's tape will temporarily hold the pieces together. The tape will act as a hinge and hold the parts together while the glue sets. There are no metal fasteners that will hold the case together, so I'm using a generous amount of glue. One of the disadvantages of filming yourself is that you aren't always aware when something is out of frame or if you forgot to hit the record button. Unfortunately, both happened several times while making this video. Checking it for square, and it was perfect. Same process with the lid frame. Because these parts are so thin, there was some slight warp to deal with. Applying weight at the corners helped it dry nearly flat. I was using whatever I could find for weight. I made that vise in machine shop class at Votech school when I was in around the 10th or 11th grade. I'm amazed I still have it after all these years. Now I'm selecting the boards to make the bottom of the case and the lid. These boards will be glued together to make a larger board, so again, I'm trying to match the grain so it looks like one solid piece of wood. I'm laying these boards out for gluing. Normally when gluing boards like this, you would run them through a planer after the glue dries to make the transition between boards perfectly smooth. I don't have a planer, so I need to make sure they are glued as evenly as possible. When the glue dries, I'll sand them until the transition is evened out. One of the themes I had hoped to demonstrate in making this video is that even with a minimally equipped shop, you can still make some nice things. I'm using all the weight I can gather to get these boards to dry as flat as possible. When the glue dried, they didn't need much sanding to smooth out the transition. Not too bad for not having a planer. This piece will be surrounded by an inlay, so the edge must be very sharp with no tear out. The tape will minimize tear out and make for a very clean cut while cutting across the grain. The sled serves this purpose on the bottom edge. A nice sharp finish cut blade is crucial as well. The tape isn't necessary when cutting with the grain. And now you can see why I cut the notch in the sides of the box and lid frame. Again, no mechanical fasteners will be used, so a generous amount of glue is called for. These spacers will help maintain the proper gap for the inlay. I'm using these little bridge pieces made from scraps so I can properly clamp the base to the box frame. Same tactic is used for the lid, but I used spring clamps and weights. A close-up of the gap for the inlay. Here the inlay, made from 1/8 inch poplar, has already been glued in place. I'm trimming away the excess inlay material. I have the saw set up so that only the excess inlay is cut away and nothing more. At this stage, I just want to sand the inlay until it's flush with the surrounding surfaces. This is not a finish sanding. Basic construction of the box and lid is complete. Time to add some additional detail. I thought a nice detail would be to add a 45-degree bevel where the lid meets the box. Later on I would realize this offered an added benefit of allowing me to hide the hinge. I'm placing tape on the table saw so that once I find the cut I want, I can mark it on the tape and repeat the same cut on the lid. You'll see this play out in a minute. First I take a small cut and then gradually take more until I get the bevel to the size I want. Now I'm going to scribe a line on the tape so that later I'll know exactly where to position the saw fence to cut the identical bevel on the lid. And there you have it, matching bevels. I forgot to press record when I made the original splines. The slow-mo here is to show a defect in one of the original splines. What I am trying to do here is recut the spline directly through the defect. As you can see, I messed up. I'm too far along now to start over, so I'll just have to try and fix this as best I can. The splines were also made of 1/8 inch poplar. I filled in the unwanted gap with a blend of sawdust and glue. It's barely visible in the final product. All of the splines needed some additional cosmetic correction, which mostly consisted of filling in gaps with glue and sawdust. If I had a do-over, I would have been much more careful installing them. In the next video, I'll build the trays that hold the game pieces and nest inside the box.